What is going on, everybody? How you all doing out there? I hope this video is finding you well. Welcome or welcome back to Get Right On In. My name is Andrew, for those of you who do not know, and today I am just going to be talking about all of the books that I read this past February. I am not even going to waste any more time on this introduction, so without further ado, let's get right on in. Alright, so I only managed to get through 4 books this last month, but that's also partially because I did some travels. If you know me personally, or if you follow my personal Instagram, then you already know that I was all over Puerto Vallarta in Jalisco, Mexico, and it was the most amazing trip I've ever had in my entire life. I am a little bit more tan than I was before. It was beautiful. I had so much fun. I was actually sent out there on an all-expenses-paid trip with Rage magazine, which is that magazine that I had been writing for. If you have been following me for a while, you might remember me talking about interviewing Alaska Thunderfuck from RuPaul's Drag Race, and after I did that little article and interview, they were really impressed and wanted me to go to Puerto Vallarta to write about that. So, I mean, I took it. I still was able to have at least a fun little reading month. I'm not behind on any of my goals, so even though I only read 4 books this month as opposed to the 9 books that I read last month, I still had a great reading month. And the first book that I finished was called The Twisted Ones by T. Kingfisher. If you watch my wrap up from last month, you will know she is a new author to me and I really love her style. This book was just as good as the other 2 or 3 of hers that I've read now already. This one follows our main character who goes by the name of Mouse as she goes through her grandma's house, and her grandma was a hoarder, so she agreed to help her dad get rid of all of her grandma's stuff. And while she is there, she discovers this journal from her step-grandfather who was talking about the Twisted Ones and this like hill in the backyard and the holler people and all of these kind of crazy things that I can't really talk too much about without any spoilers. But essentially, Mouse and a couple of the nearby neighbors go on a little adventure to figure out what had happened, because there are some statues that are doing some things to some people that let those people have children, and I'm just gonna leave that at that. But it was a very twisted book, so The Twisted Ones was a very proper title for this one. I did give it a 4 out of 5 because it was very intriguing and it was very heart-pounding, but there were also some similarities to that book that I read last month called The Hollow Places that just felt like a little too similar, especially for it coming from the same author. But overall, I did enjoy this book. It definitely is just very twisted, so if you are into those kinds of twisted books, I would recommend this one. If you're not, maybe skip it, because there's some weird stuff for sure, but overall it was definitely one of the highlights of the month. The next book that I finished was called The Dirty Streets of Heaven by Tad Williams, and I have wanted to read Tad Williams for so long now. I see books from him all over the place, all of the time. It seems like he has so many different series, so many different books, so much else going on, but every time I'm ever in a library or a bookstore or whatever, it's always at least book 2 onward, so I've really never had an opportunity to start any of his series before. So this one here I found here at the San Diego Library. It is the first of the trilogy. It is the only book in the trilogy that they have, of course, but I at least wanted to give one of his books a go, and I liked this book. It definitely had like a Dresden Files type feeling to the writing style, and I have not read any other Tad Williams, obviously, like I just said, so I can't really compare it to anything else that he's done. I know that this isn't necessarily his most popular of series, and while I enjoyed this book, I am not necessarily rushing out to go find out what happens next. And since they don't have the other books at the library, I will read them if I ever get an opportunity for it. But at the beginning, I was really into this, and I was like, oh, if it's really good, then like I'll just go buy the rest of the series to find out what happens. And then just by the end, I was like, okay, I don't really know how it's gonna be more of a series. The book itself was pretty good. Bobby Dollar is the main character. He's just a fallen angel. So there's a lot of like heaven versus hell, angels versus versus demons type stuff. It felt like a supernatural episode in a lot of ways as well, which I did enjoy, but I mean, overall, I gave this one a 3.75 out of 5, just because, I don't know, it kind of sank toward the end a little bit for me and just dragged on a little bit. It started out so well, and then just by the end, I was just ready for it to be over, and especially because it didn't really give me any kind of incentive into looking into the rest of the series. It was just kind of like a meh for me, but I would be opening to continue to read stuff from this author if I ever had the opportunity. So if you are a Tad Williams fan and you have any recommendations for me, I would love to take them, because I did like the style of his writing, and I know that he has way more books than this, and I'm sure that there's a lot better books than this as well, so I'm totally open for recommendations in that regard. But in the meantime, that one's just gonna go back to the library, so that's that. The next book that I finished for the month was my favorite book of the month, and it was called... The next book that I finished this month was actually my favorite book of the month, and it was called They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. This book was so well done, and if you do know me at all, or if you have been following me at all, then you know that I recently lost my father. So this book has a lot of conversations about death in it, and they were oddly healing for me in their own right as I'm dealing with my own grief process. But in this book, we see the two main characters, Mateo and Rufus, who have each received a phone call from this group called the Death Cast, which is a thing in this world that they live in. And the Death Cast pretty much just calls you at midnight on the day that you're gonna die and just says, hey, you've got less than 24 hours left to live. So this is now your last day on Earth. Do with it as you please. You will not know what time you're gonna die. You will not know how you're gonna die. Just know that today you're gonna die. So there is this whole conversation about what to do on your last day, and it also takes the whole idea of living every day like it is your last. And there's, oh my gosh, it really is just so good. It was so intense. And there's also this thing called the Last Day Friend, which is this app that is made in this world, so people who are experiencing their last day can connect with somebody else who is also experiencing their last day, and then perhaps share your last day together, especially if you don't want your friends or your family to see what might happen to you, which is kind of what happens, I guess, with these two characters, but they just meet on that last day friend thing, and so the whole book is just about the two of them spending their last day together and meeting each other for the first time and sharing their stories. And it's really emotional, and it's the first book that almost got me in the tears, because I've talked before about how I've really never cried in a book, which has like shocked some people, but this one almost got me. It really did. It really, really did. But I do have a couple of problems with it as well. I ended up giving it a 4.25 out of 5 just because there are a lot of side characters that don't really need to be in there. Like, there'll just be chapters where it's like, so-and-so got a call from Deathcast today, and then it's like, that's the only chapter that they're in. And then there'll be other chapters that's like, so-and-so did not get a call from Deathcast today, but they have something to do with some sort of other side character. And at first it was fine, but just by the end, it kind of took away from like the main story for me, and I was like, I don't need to be in the last 20 pages meeting yet another person who has just gotten a phone call that they're gonna die. Some of the characters didn't even have any kind of resolution to them, so it did kind of like ruin that a little bit, I guess. So that was just what ultimately kind of sank my rating down a little bit lower. But overall, I absolutely loved this book so much, and like I said when I first started talking about it, it really has helped me out with my own grief in a lot of ways, and just so many discussions about death and life and all these things that I will actually be putting out a full ass review about this book, because I have so much to say about it that I don't have time for just in a wrap up. But I do recommend this book. It's just like I said, there's just so many extra characters that by the end it was a little bit of like, okay, I get it, like I want to focus on the two main characters and not all these other people who are gonna die. But regardless, this. I really did enjoy this book. It was my favorite of the month. It helped me out with a lot of my grief, and I'm really grateful for that. So just be sure to look out for my full review on this book coming soon. And finally, the last book that I finished for this month was the Dragon Reborn, which is the third book in the Wheel of Time series. I am buddy reading basically this entire series with Amanda over from the Reading and Writing Life. We did The Great Hunt last month. We did Dragon Reborn this month. We're moving into the fourth book. What's that one called? The Shadow Rising, I think. It's up on my shelf. It's next up. But that will be our March read together. And yeah, I am chugging along here on the Wheel of Time. Still not really sure how I feel about this series as a whole, just to be honest. It took me 3 times to read The Eye of the World before I finally finished it. And then I DNF'd The Great Hunt on the first time reading that. And then I finally reread The Eye of the World last year at the end of 2020 as an immersion read. And that was really cool. So I decided that I wanted to do the rest of these books as an immersion read, just because if y'all have read these books, then y'all know that Robert Jordan can get a little dense sometimes. So sometimes it's a little bit like, okay, just get to the point. I don't care about their clothes or their this or their that. So it's easier for me to just have the audiobook going, so that if there's sections that just are not as interesting, I can just kind of listen to it and my eyes don't have to go as cross-eyed. But I did like this book. I gave it a 3.75 out of 5. Amanda and I were talking about like this whole series, and we're treating it as just one big book, right? So like each book is a chapter of the bigger book in this series, right? So this book slash chapter to me, as I was saying to her toward the end of this, in like the last 100 pages, I was like, I feel like a lot has happened, but nothing has happened at the same time. And I compared it to the Two Towers when Merry and Pippin are with Treebeard and they go to the little Ent moot as all of the Ents come together to talk about the war that's going on. And they're there for hours and hours and hours. The sun goes down. Merry and Pippin are just there waiting. And then Treebeard's like, oh, we have just said hello. And they're like, you've just said hello? Like, we've been here for so long. What are you even doing? So that's kind of how I felt about this book. Like, by the end of it, I was like, wow, we just went through 700 pages and like, that's all that happened? I don't know. Like, so I don't know. I didn't dislike it. I'm still looking forward to getting through the rest of this series. I heard that the next 2 books are the best outside of the Brandon Sanderson ones, so I'm certainly looking forward to that. But in the meantime, this one's just done. And that is going to take care of what I read this last month. I would love to hear any of your thoughts on these books if you have read them yourself. I would love to know any of the thoughts you have on any of the books that you read for this month. So be sure to let me know down in those comments. While you're there, if you enjoyed this video, I would love it if you gave it a little thumbs up, as well as potentially press on that little subscribe button to join me for more adventures and book chats and writer chats in the future. In the meantime, I hope you all have a day just as beautiful as you, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye!